Got some up on top of this thing. Let's see. Should be around those ones. Just gonna kind of give them some little pops. Little pop. Pop. Come on. Pop. And we'll lift it up. See if any of them want to chase. That one did, jeez. Hit myself in the head with my rod here. That one wanted to chase. Well, welcome back. It is fall. I love fall. You can get these cooler mornings and then you get these warm afternoons sometimes, and it can just be gorgeous. The leaves are changing. A lot of times the fish can be relatively bitey. And so today what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna talk through, some of my go-to fall walleye presentations. I'll show that one off here quick, because as you've probably noticed, there's definitely a transition that happens in the fall. You know, some of those typical summertime patterns, some of those summertime presentations that work all summer long tend to get a little bit slower, and you kind of have to switch things up. And so I'm going to give you probably my top, I don't even know what my number is going to be, my top handful of fall walleye presentations. But I'm going to kind of break down how I use and where I use each one, because just because it's fall and I give you one of these presentations doesn't mean it'll work anywhere. All right, so that will bring us to our first fall presentation, and that is going to jigs and plastics. You know, I get away from them a little bit in the summer, but the fall, they really seem to fire up again for me. And so there's a few different things that I'm gonna do, a few different ways that I will use these. One, probably the most aggressive tactic that I'll start with is using see if I can get it twisted around here. There we go. Using a 1/2 ounce smeltinator and a 4-inch paddle shad. This is my go-to for big suspended walleyes. It is a ton of fun using this bait, but it doesn't work everywhere. You know, when I'm fishing around home, I will get bit on these at times, but this tends to be either for big suspended fish, for when I'm up on more of those Canadian Shield style lakes. That is when I will use that. You know, it's not often gonna work on some of my deep, clear lakes as well as some of these other presentations. So that will definitely play. And what I do with this one, again, it's that 1/2 ounce with the 4-inch paddle shad. I will cast it out, and I can work it closer to bottom, but most often I'm using this as a slow roll. It's literally just a slow reel. You get that paddle moving. It does not take much speed to get that thing moving. And so I'll just slow roll it over the tops of these heads. And if you watch any of my videos from up on Rainy, you know that they just crush it. When they see that, a lot of times they'll come up like lake trout and just smoke it. So that one is my first jig in plastic. I'm using this on, this one's actually the 7.6 medium from Trikai. Upsize, go to a little bit bigger, stiffer rod for this, just because I'm throwing heavier baits around. And I have also used that 7.2 medium heavy from Elliott a lot. Really like that rod for this as well, but if you watch my last video, unfortunately that broke. But that is kind of my go-to setup. My reel, Piscifun Carbon X2 2000. You know, that's probably my favorite reel that I use on everything. I will mix in a few others, but that is my go-to. 15-pound braid, if I can, usually Daiwa J braid with a 10 to a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, depending on the water clarity and how many pike are in the area. And so this is one, like I said, that I will use for suspended. I'll also use this when these fish are on humps. You know, I can go around and you'll sometimes see schools of fish, or there'll be one bigger one off to the side. So I'll use that, targeting some of those bigger single fish as well. And so that is jig and plastic number 1 that I use in the fall. Number 2 is the one that I just caught that one on, actually. And that is the smeltinator again, although sometimes I will use the tungsten stand-up as well. But this one is a 1/4 ounce smeltinator with the eye candy minnow. It's more of that straight tail presentation. And I really like this one when I am fishing in weeds, because you can rip it through. You don't have to worry about your bait falling off. When I'm fishing shallow sand, I like to use it because I can use it in a lot of different ways. I can let it roll on bottom. I can snap it. I can do a lot of different things with this. The straight tail kind of is like a Swiss Army knife for me. You can see here, the spot that I actually just caught that one, it's this kind of shallow, sandy area mixed in with some weeds, and then that drops off to deeper water. And I'll actually just back up. You could probably see it on the live scope. It's a pretty steep break, and so The reason I was using this one is depending on where these fish moved, I was seeing some fish off the break, some fish up on top. No matter where they were, I could work it with this in some way or another. You know, if they were off the break, this 1/4 ounce was heavy enough where I could get down and I could hover it above them. It doesn't take a lot of movement to get that thing, that tail, just kind of wiggle in there. So I could hover it above them. I could snap it if I wanted to. Again, if I was working through these weeds, I can snap it through those weeds. I could slow roll it over top of them. Lots of different ways that I can use this one here. Primarily for me, I won't go down much lighter than an 1/8 ounce. 1/4 ounce is kind of my go-to, but I will go 1/8 up to 1/2 ounce, depending on how deep, how fast I'm working, all those different things. Rod and reel for that one, 610, medium light, extra fast. And I'm using this one. This one's actually the Illumix. I do mix this one around every now and again too, but obviously my Carbon X2 is my favorite. Still a very good reel. I'm just a little biased to the Carbon X2. And then I will downsize my braid to about an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader often, just because I want to be able to whip this thing out a mile if I'm in clear water or whatever. 8-pound braid, and then I will go to a usually 8, maybe 10-pound fluorocarbon leader as well. I don't often get down to like 6, anything like that. I'll usually do 8 or 10 with a plastic like this. And then I'll connect that with an FG knot. And moving on to the last one in that jig and plastic arsenal that I use in the fall is the Ned rig. This one is the tungsten Nedster. One thing I like, these new tungsten jigs that Norfin are coming out with, I don't know if you can see that or not, but the size is actually printed on it, which is nice for me, just as a reminder when I get things mixed up or have jigs sitting there, just to know what size I'm using. This one's the 3/16, kind of that sneaky in between that I like. And then this one is the Eye Candy Jig Crawler. That's probably my favorite for the Ned rig that I've found so far out of the Eye Candy collection. I used it this spring with my buddy Peter up on Rainy. You know, we were fishing shallow water, fishing these things, super fun. And, you know, the Ned rig I will use in a lot of different areas as well. I'll use it shallow sand. That's when I want to drag that thing on bottom. You know, if you're fishing like a leech or winnie, sometimes a Ned rig can be very good, especially if those fish are a little bit more finicky or if they're feeding down. You know, if those fish are feeding up, that's when I will use that straight tail or even sometimes that paddle shad, but most often that straight tail and get them to chase up. This one I'm using more when those fish are feeding down. I just kind of want to work it on that sand, nice and slow, let it drag. I will also work this one on some of these deeper humps. I'll just upsize my weight a little bit, you know, maybe go to 1/4 ounce, maybe even up to 3/8, but I'll use that, get down and just kind of work it over those rocks. You know, then you're a little risk for getting hung up and having to lose some jigs, but you know, one of my videos I filmed a couple years ago with my buddy Peter, we were up on Rainy. I was using the paddle shad, he was using a Ned rig on some of these deep humps, and he probably caught 2 or 3 of the biggest fish that day. And so that can also be a very big player anytime those fish are feeding down and not necessarily up. And so a lot of times when I'm using this one, I'm using it on a 7.3 medium light, extra fast. I've used a few different other ones. I've used down to a 610, up a little higher. That 7.3 has been about what has seemed the best feel for me on these Ned rigs, but I'm not necessarily a Ned rig connoisseur either. And then I will a lot of times go to that same 8-pound braid. If I can use a Daiwa J braid that is high vis, that is what I'll use as much as possible. It just seems to be the most castable line for me. And then I'll go a lot of times an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, again with that FG knot. And that leads us down to our jig. Like I said, that tungsten Nedster that the Norfin just came out with, should be available this fall or next spring, I can't remember. Just got a chance to use these a little bit, use it actually as a jig crawler. Love these things so far. The hook keeper's awesome. The hook super strong. And so that one got a little longer because it was one presentation with jigs and plastics, but I kind of broke it into 3 subcategories, again, depending on the situation. So I'm gonna get back up front, get rolling, hopefully catch another fish with another presentation, then we'll talk through that one. I was gonna show the next presentation, but there's a prime candidate here for one of those big swim baits. Sees it. Jeez, they're just like that. And that is how they can attack them when they want them. So we'll still move on to the next presentation. I was starting to use the next presentation, and then I saw this guy suspended. So that's another thing for the fall is sometimes in these areas, you're gonna see more than one potential for presentation to use, depending on how these fish are set up. So have them ready. Oh, let's see. Of course I had that all twisted up. Yard sail here. I knew when I set that rod there, that was gonna be an issue. Oh man, it got windy here quickly. Come on, buddy. Let's see. It's a solid fish. These big paddle tails, whoo, do bring out some of the bigger fish at times. Oh, fun stuff. Well, I'll show that one off, and then we'll keep on rolling with this video, talk through the next couple presentations. Oh, beauty of a 27-incher. We'll get that one back. Then we'll kind of talk through what I was originally planning on doing. All right, so what I was doing is I was originally working my way over this flat to get to this hump, saw that suspended fish and had to cast at it with a big paddle tail. But my plan was to go to that hump, and then I was going to be using a reaction bait. This one is the pitch and puppet. I also have a puppet minnow tied on. Some days they want that little thicker presentation like that. Some days they want a little thinner with puppet minnow. But being able to go to these humps and find either pods of fish, or a lot of times I'll go look for these bigger singles, cast it out, let it hit bottom, and kind of rip it up off bottom there. Being able to kind of get these fish to react. If they don't want anything to do with any of those plastics, that's when I will kind of work to one of those. Just being able to, again, trigger these fish to bite if they're not in the mood for something else. You know, a couple different cadences that I do when I'm using this is the classic where you just let it hit bottom and then you just do big rips and you just keep doing that. Another one that I will do is I'll just do, let it get down to it, and I'll do that first initial pop to see how it reacts. If it reacts strong, then I'll maybe keep popping it. If it kind of does a slow follow, I'll let it just kind of pendulum down, and then sometimes play a little keep away with it. Another thing that I will do is I'll just let it do smaller pops, either right on bottom or right above that fish, just kind of reading what these fish are doing as that thing kind of darts, and see if you can trigger some bites. So like I was saying, those rock humps can be classic for reaction bait as they're out those 20, 30 foot humps. You know, sometimes over those deep flats too, if they're closer to bottom, maybe they're not suspended, you're not going to throw a big paddle tail on them. Throw one of these. You can get down, up and down very quickly still, but if they're closer to bottom, it can sometimes be that reaction that they need if they're eating down. Setup for that one, 7.2, medium, extra fast. Go up to a 7.2 because, you know, some of these baits are a little heavier, need a little more backbone to work those things appropriately. I'll do a lot of times 15-pound braid to a 10 to 14 pound fluorocarbon leader. I do want something a little heavier often when I'm using something like this as far as the fluoro, so I tend to lean towards 14. I have gone up to 20 as well, just because if you have too light a fluoro, it can get kind of knotted up and get twisted up with the hooks and all of that kind of stuff. So that's my setup for the reaction bait over those humps. The other thing that I will do, if I'm working some of those humps and I am not getting bit, they just don't want to touch anything else, then I will go Finesse a little more, and I will go a jig and crawler. You know, the black tungsten jigs are so classic. Depending on the minnow that you're using, I will use a short shank a lot of times and just hook it right in the mouth, out the head, and just let it swim around down there. So that can be something you can cast up on top of these humps. Again, you don't even need forward-facing sonar for this. Drive over with your 2D sonar, you see fish, drop straight down, vertical jig, or do like we used to do forever, is follow a brake line or go to the edge of the hump and just slow troll with that jig. A lot of times for me, I'm using a 1/4 ounce. I will go down to an 1/8 if I'm pitching up shallow. 1/4 ounce, 3/8 even if I'm fishing some of those deeper humps and I want to move a little faster. But jig and minnow is a classic in the fall. And the other thing I will say is probably one of the most notorious fall bites is that shallow sandy bite on leech, on winnie, on some of those. And I will use either this one or the tungsten stand-up. I love that bait for some of those shallow sandfish on specifically leech is one that I fish more. And so being able to let that thing either pop when I'm using that one, that's what I do a lot, is I'll do a pop, let it sit, pop, let it sit. Sometimes I will slow drag. Otherwise, if I need to, I'll hover it above them if they're looking for more of an up bite. But I find those fish on leech tend to be a little more, or just those sandfish in general, tend to be eating a little bit more down versus up. Main rod that I use for that, 7.3, medium light, extra fast. Again, Piscifun Carbon X2 2000. and I kind of went through the sizes down to an 1/8, maybe even 1/16 if I'm really shallow, need really finesse, go up to a 1/4 or 3/8, using 8 to 10 pound braid, and to most often 8. We'll go down to a 6 with this one as well. I don't go down to 6 with a lot of those other presentations, but that is something I will do with a jig and minnow if I need to. But a lot of times 8 or 10 pound fluorocarbon leader with that FG knot. And so that is a little bit more finesse. And if I want to go ultimate finesse, I don't even know if I have that rod out yet because I couldn't find the right minnows. But if I want to go ultimate finesse, I will go on top of these fish and I will drop a big rigged minnow. That is my go-to if I need to catch fish in the fall. Get a rigged minnow. You can have a 1/16 ounce weight. You can go up to 1/2 ounce weight depending on how deep and how fast you're wanting to go. But essentially you're gonna want some sort of weight. These new tungsten weights from Norfin I really like. You can see, I'll try to get it so you can see it. They're again stamped with the weight that's on there. This one's a 1/4 ounce. Then you have your swivel. I did have a question in my last video on what I mean when I'm talking rigging. And so that's what I'm talking about, essentially just a Lindy rig, a weight to a swivel to a fluorocarbon leader, and then I will often use just a plain, this one's a number 2 Yamakatsu hook. Just such a classic. These fish almost can't resist it, but especially back around home on my small, deep, clear lakes where these fish can get a little bit picky in the fall, I will get to those big minnows and I'll get to a school of fish or even a single fish and I'll get right on top of them and I will just drop this straight down and right above them, and you'll see those fish chase up after that minnow. They'll swim around and then they'll eventually bite. You know, another thing that you can do, going back to what we used to always do in the fall, is troll either weed edges, troll those breaks, troll around humps, and just slow troll with that minnow. You'll feel that minnow start to freak out. You know that fish is close, then you feel it bite. Open up the bail. If you didn't already have it open, just holding the line. Let that fish take it for a little while, feel it, see if it's in its mouth, and then just kind of give it a nice reel down into it. And a lot of times that will catch fish when nothing else does. And also I will cast these. If I cast them, I'll have a little bit shorter leader, and I will not want to make long casts because you'll do a number on your minnows, but I will, if these fish are moving or if I want to stay off them a little bit, I will cast this and almost use it like a jig, but just kind of hover it right above them. That can be a super effective pattern as well. But that's my presentation. If I need to get bit and I want to drop down one thing, if these fish are being inactive, that will 9 times out of 10 work better than anything else. And so when I'm using a rod for that, I do want something a little bit longer. Sorry, that wind is picking up, so hopefully you can still hear me. I do want something a little bit longer just because I'm going to be casting these at times. I want to be able to have that minnow play freely, have some play in that tip for if that fish does bite. I can like let it sit on it and I can feel it without it really knowing that I am there. And so I do have a little bit longer, a lot of times 7/6 even. I will do 7 to 7/6, but I like that 7/6 in a medium light. And then I'll go 10 pound braid with that, an 8 to 10 pound fluoro leader. If I am on like a super clear bite or it's a really finicky bite, I will go down to a 6 pound as well. But you have to be a little more careful with that, obviously, when you're fighting these fish. And me, I kind of horse these fish in. So that's not always my bread and butter, but I will do it if I need to. You can go mono with this as well. I still like braid because I like to feel every movement of that minnow. But braid, I know a lot of guys rig with braid. With mono, I should say. And I will say the same thing with the reaction bait. Brett, dude is dialed when it comes to presentation stuff. You know that. He uses mono on his reaction bait rods because Al Lindner does. So those guys are better than me. They know more than me, so that's what they do. I'm still partial to braid because I like to feel it when it's hitting those rocks, when it's getting bit on the drop, those types of things. But again, that's sometimes just a preference thing. So another fall walleye tip video coming at you. Still staying very warm. Water temps today are, let me see what we're at, still 63 degrees. And so there's a lot of good fall fishing yet to come. I'm looking forward to it. As always, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.